live Q&A, attempting to answer your most challenging questions on the spot. If you're watching this and it's not Wednesday afternoon Greek time, then you are watching a pre-recorded live Q&A, which means if you do put questions in the comment section, I won't be responding to them immediately, but I'll either respond in the comments or pardon, or I'll respond in next week's Q&A live. So very exciting times there. Yeah, for those who are watching live, don't worry if your question seems like this is way too simple to be asking on the live Q&A. The biggest mistake you could make is not asking a question that perhaps is tickling in the back of your mind. So please do fire away. As with previous weeks, I've got some preloaded questions, which I'll be answering throughout the session. And if you are watching after this has been uploaded, I will have indexed the whole session, so you can have a look at the index in the video description, and that will say at which times the various different questions were being addressed. So I think I just have to switch on live chat to see if anybody's live chatting. Otherwise, I'll just crack on with the preloaded questions to start with. Cheers. Great to see you all. Yeah, and yeah, as you could probably tell, absolute gangbusters, lovely day here today in Vasiliki, Greece. Yeah, it's really pretty warm actually. I am wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt. This is the Joyrider Dutch Bike Special, only available upon request. It's not an off-the-peg number. Okay, so I'm going to fire away with the preloaded questions. The first one comes from Chris, and he says, I was wondering if you could expand on doing the wild thing, that's on a boat, not in the bedroom, to get downwind, such as the best way to do it and things to do or not to do. I'd love to see a video on that when the season restarts, as would I. The wild thing doesn't really get talked about so much these days. Oh, hi, E1K. Great to have you on board. Doesn't get talked about so much these days with the advent of most performance catamarans having a spinnaker on. But the wild thing is basically what we're doing with the spinnaker, but it came about before the spinnaker was a common piece of equipment on a performance catamaran. The Tornado and the Hurricane 5.9 were the two forerunners, I'd say, in the wild thing technique. You may be thinking, but what is it? Tell me. Okay, I'm going to tell you. What the wild thing is it's for the downwind point of sail, so on the broad reach, and what you're trying to do is get the windward hull up in the air, so we're reducing the friction from having twice as many hulls in the water, and trying to get the boat as far downwind as possible. So the way we would go about this, and before we go on to how to do it, I would point out that in the smaller boats, like anything under 17, 18 feet long, it is difficult to really get a decent wild thing going. But that extra hull length in the bigger boats really does make it a bit more feasible. So what we do, get the boat on a broad reach. If you're sailing with two people, definitely get the crew on the leeward side of the boat for a start. Very important. And then what we'll do is from the broad reach, we'll take the boat up a little bit, powering it up. So not as far up as a beam reach. Hope everybody's happy with these sailing terms. And we just heat it up a little bit by turning a little bit towards the wind, just until the windward hull starts to lift. If it seems like it's not going to lift, then if you're helming the boat sitting on the windward side of the boat, maybe you need to move inboard, maybe even towards the middle of the boat. But do be aware that control will become a bit more difficult when you get further away from the edge. As you get towards the middle of the boat, you have slightly less control. So we're going to move in towards the middle of the boat. We're doing everything we can to encourage that windward hull to come out of the water. And then once we've got the hull out of the water, if it's going higher up, we can then turn the boat more downwind, a lot like we do on those special Joyrider TV speed runs. Every time the hull comes higher, we'll turn the boat more downwind. And the aim of the game is to have the windward hull out of the water going as deep as possible. It takes a lot of practice to really nail that technique, and it does take nerves of steel, especially in the early stages. It's more of a kind of light to moderate wind technique, which means if you do capsize, maybe, especially if you're sailing solo, you might not have enough weight to bring the boat back upright. So well worth taking a bag with you. Get a bag. If you don't know about the bag, check out the bag video. I'll put that in the video description below later on. And yeah, take a bag with you. I believe in the bag. The bag is a game changer for sure. Yeah, so we're just trying to get the boat as far down as possible, windward hull in the air. If the hull starts dropping, then we'll just take the boat a little bit back towards the wind. But as with all sailing, we're trying to keep all of our movements and adjustments on the boat as small and subtle as possible, so that everything is very smooth. Anything that isn't smooth is going to disturb the flow of water around the hulls and the flow of air around the sails. So that is the wild thing in a nutshell. In certain countries, it's known as the flyer. In other countries, it's been called the Cumberland as well, named after the famous sausage, of course. But there you go. It's a great technique. Right, I'm just going to check in with everybody who's checking in. Great to have you all on board. Thanks for coming. Hello, Andrew in North Carolina. Great to have you on board. Hello, Noah. Glad you could make it. Hello, Willem. Aha. And Jeff is here, and he's in North Carolina as well, I would. Jeff from gearreport.com. If you like outdoors, then check out Gear Report. That is gear-report.com, where Jeff is doing a lot of reviews of good, high quality outdoor gear like camping gear, knives, torches, and other stuff. And he does a series called Show Us Your Humvee, where people are doing what they do on Show Us Your Cat, but with old military vehicles, I believe, very high quality. Okay, hello, Frank. Hello, Kurosh. Hello, Hutchie. Hutchie says, I remember when the Wild Thing was a new concept in the Hurricane fleet last century. Great way to put your crew in the washing machine. Yeah, as you can imagine, with the crew sitting on the leeward side of the boat, if the water is anything other than dead flat, the crew is going to be absolutely pressure blasted with water in the face. Very good for the sinuses, so I'm told. Hello, Robin. Great to have you with us, as always. Hello, Alejandro. Thanks for tuning in. Robin says, loving the new short info videos. Yeah, on those videos, it's a new scheme that YouTube has brought out, which is called Shorts. I believe it's to compete with certain other platforms, just these videos. And the criteria of these videos is that it has to be less than 1 minute long And for some peculiar reason, I think it's because you're meant to make them on your telephone. They're meant to be filmed in the portrait aspect, which is why I have been getting some abuse, which, to be fair, I would have been giving that abuse out if I saw somebody else's video filmed in portrait. But it's because those are the ways that YouTube want it to be done. The reason that I'm doing it is because it reaches a wider audience than the normal videos reach. And part of this game that I'm playing with YouTube is to reach as many people as possible. So I thought that could be another thing. But I think it's also quite worthwhile to put a little pocket-sized bit of useful information into a less than 1 minute video, and hopefully they are helpful, which how could they not be? Hello Matthew, great to have you with us as always. Hello Max. Oh dear, the ice left my home lake, not homemade lake, on Sunday afternoon, so the Taipan 4.99 could go out flying a hull. Water temperature about 2 degrees. Makes me feel quite lucky to be sat here in my t-shirt and shorts. Okay, Andrew says, how difficult is it to paddle a 16 around a dock and boat ramp? With paddling on the boat, first thing is, are you carrying a paddle or are you doing it with your hands? If there's very little wind, then the classic paddling technique is kind of demonstrate here on the boat. The classic paddling technique is to go, is this gonna, yeah, it probably is to go kind of lying down on the front of the boat like it's a surfboard, and then you can really get the arms going. That's if you're doing some distance. What really helps if you're doing that is if you are sailing with giving it the front crawl off the bow there. But yeah, that would be my go-to method for paddling, unless you actually happen to be carrying a paddle, in which case you could take a more leisurely approach. If you're sailing solo, then having a paddle is certainly going to be the way forward, because you can paddle and then you can have one foot on the tiller connecting bar and steer using your foot. That would be the way that I'd get around that. How easy is it really depends on the obstacles, obstructions in your way where you are going. Pardon me. Okay. Rodrigo, thanks for tuning in as always. Should I taper or no my battens on the Hobie 16? From the factory, they don't come tapered, so I'd say don't bother. It'd be a hell of a job to do, and to do the job would be quite hard, but to do the job so that it's done absolutely properly, it's going to be even harder, because you're going to be wanting to taper all of the battens evenly, which is going to be very difficult to do. So I would say don't. If I had my own 16 and I lived in the real world and I wanted to eke an extra bit of performance out of the boat, I wouldn't taper my battens. I'd look for other avenues in which I could get that extra bit of performance out, which, from seeing absolutely everybody's videos that I've ever seen of them sailing their boats, the way that everybody could be getting more from their boat is to play the main sheet a bit more, which is a lot easier to do than tapering battens. Alejandro, thank you for the VMG video. Expanding on it, as a beginner, I've heard, oh, hello, that pinching is bad, but if I want to sail as direct as possible, don't I need to pinch? I believe, yes, this was one from our preloaded questions as well. Thanks for the reminder there. So Alejandro is talking about pinching. So this is a term. Let's pull out the board of power here, and I'm just going to use this boat. As always, on any sort of board, if you're into some sailing instruction, the wind, all right, just have to check that where I am actually drawing is visible. The wind is always, is that backwards on your screen as well? I don't know. The wind is always from the top. And then our classic upwind sailing angle is about 45 degrees from the wind. So when we were, just to recap on that VMG video, the VMG is the optimal course to get us to a windward point in the shortest time. So if we sail further away from the wind, more like on a close reach, our boat speed is going to be much more, but the distance that we have to sail is also going to be more. If we sail closer to the wind, which is what is called pinching, if we sail higher up than our optimal angle, the optimal angle that we're usually looking for, we're going back to the telltales on the jib. So the outside telltale should always be flying straight back, and the inside flying telltale should also be flying straight back, or if it is windy enough to trapeze or windy enough to start lifting the hull a little bit, that inside telltale could start to lift. As the wind gets stronger, it can come up more. When the wind's really strong, this is the inside telltale, can almost be vertical. And so if both telltales are flying straight back and the wind is light, that means we're not pinching, we are sailing our optimal course. But as the wind increases, our boat speed increases. So this is bringing in that apparent wind chat as well. Because we're creating more induced wind, that means that the inside telltale is going to lift. I hope this is good for everyone. So if the inside telltale starts to lift, but we want to keep it here, what's actually going to happen is we're going to start turning away from the wind to try to keep this telltale flying straight back. So we're actually going to end up in a strong wind. If we've got the jib in tight and we're trying to keep these telltales flying straight back, we're going to end up on a beam reach if we're trying to keep this inside telltale straight back. So that's why in the strong wind, we allow the inside telltale to go almost vertical. And that is going to give us our optimal course. Pinching, when we turn further up towards the wind, we're going to sail much slower, but we're going to sail a shorter distance. This can be, the times when pinching is the right thing to do is perhaps you're sailing around a course. Let's go on the other tack. So we're on the other tack, because when we're sailing on a course, we generally go round buoys, leaving them on the port side. Let's say this is our normal course, but the buoy that we're going for is like here. So to put in on a, like, let's say you're sailing a Hobie 14, to put in 2 tacks here, it's going to be very expensive time-wise, whereas maybe we can pinch and get around the mark without tacking. That might be one time when pinching is a good idea. Another time when pinching might be a good idea is maybe there's another boat. Can we see this? Yes, we can. All right, another boat having a little pop and thinking about sailing over the top of you. So if we turn our boat a little bit more towards the wind, he's going to slow down a lot as well if he still tries to sail over the top of you, and it's your right of way. So that is another time when pinching might be a good idea. Of course, this mark could also be some sort of obstruction on the water, but the best thing to do is, it is best to avoid pinching, because with catamarans, the way we get the boat to sail high upwind is by sailing fast on the optimal course, because the faster we go, the more effectively the foils are going to be working. So the rudders and the dagger boards are going to be working much better if we're sailing faster. And over a long distance, we're actually going to end up as high as we would do if we had been pinching, and the boat will be slipping sideways a lot more. But over a very short distance, maybe you want to just send it up, use your boat speed a bit to get around an obstacle. So there is what I have to say on the topic of pinching. I hope that clears some things up, or just makes you feel quite baffled. All right, scrolling back. All right, Jeff says, oh, here we go. Jeff says, Jeff is, of course, our roving reporter for Show Us Your Cat, based out of North Carolina, USA. And if you'd like Jeff to come for a sail with you and feature your boat in Show Us Your Cat, then just get hold of Jeff, who is on here under the title of gearreport.com. And recently he got to have a go on an F18 Evolution. It's getting close to the top of his editing queue. It's just crazy busy, no problem, man. And Jeff says adults don't shoot vertical video, as we all know, until the that is apart from the adults who didn't make videos until they got a telephone, and then because everybody else on the telephone films in portrait, it has become a little bit of an industry standard there. Okay, Moritz. Hey, Joe, how are you going? Yeah, it's all good, man. Enjoying a bit of sunshine and just some soft drinks. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, very exciting times as we move closer one day at a time to being able to get back out on the water. Eustace, great to have you with us. I sailed, but it's the winter. Yeah, I think that's a fairly good reason for not getting out when it's really cold. Chris, hi. Nice to have you on board. Hope it's all good there in Texas. Hope it's warmed up a bit. We heard reports of very cold weather, absolutely unheard of for that part of the world. So I hope you're doing okay. Hello, Oscar. Great to have you with us in Austria. And Kurosh. Okay, I have strings on the bridle wires to see the direction of the apparent wind. Is it correct that the apparent wind direction should be more or less 90 degrees for sailing for optimal power? Okay, let's get up and on the move to take a look at this for Kurosh. All right, let's just flip this round. And here we've got Hobie 16, number 6, of course. All right, so yeah, we use VHS video cassette here because it is big. And if you buy a 180-minute VHS tape, that'll probably last you about 10 years. So it's very inexpensive. And somebody did say, yeah, but you can't get it anymore. So I did have a look on eBay, and yes, you can get it. Yeah, so this 90 degrees apparent wind angle, which will be with these wind indicators coming straight across the boat, this wind angle is for downwind sailing only. So when we're sailing on a broad reach, that is the angle that we're looking for. And like, this all comes back to this VMG. That is the optimal VMG for downwind sailing. That's if you don't have a spinnaker, is to have the those wind indicators going straight across the boat like that. So there we go. All right, so it's a good question. Okay, Oscar, all right, okay, cool. Chris, yeah, it was 12 degrees F. I think that's Fahrenheit, but it does look, it could be an, what do you call it? Okay, we've got Will. Hello, Will, great to have you with us. Okay, for some reason my screen's gone a bit darker. I think it's because I went in the sun. My rudder pins have grooves worn on them. Should I replace them with new pins? That is an absolutely yes, because once those rudder pins are worn down so much, for those who haven't seen a worn down rudder pin, let's just quickly draw what this will look like. Okay, so the rudder pin, not to scale, would usually be like this, but over time what will happen is it will start to get bits worn, like here, and again, not to scale here, so these bits will actually be missing. And if your rudder pin becomes worn like that, it means no amount of bushing is going to take that slop out of the rudders. So definitely replace the rudder pins. I think in the real world, where you're sailing the boat maybe at weekends, a couple of times during the week, maybe when you've got holidays, maybe every day, a pair of rudder pins should last you probably 2 years. And it's well worth just getting some new ones, getting those in there. And then you can still keep the old warm ones as spare, just in case you do break one. With the aluminium rudder pins that you have in Hobie 16s, the benefit we've got with those over the stainless steel ones is if your boat does hit something going backwards, then rather than damaging the back of the boat or the rudder castings or the gudgeons, it will snap the pins, which is much better because the pins are relatively inexpensive and easy to replace. So it's good to have a spare set just in case that does happen, especially if you've just driven somewhere with your boat to go for a bit of boating. All right, scrolling back. Okay, no problem, Alejandro. Always glad to help. Thank you so much. I have a Hobie getaway, planning on doing some local club racing. It's going to be fun. Nice. Ah, we have Stray Cat. Hi, Joe. I'll be on the water for the first time on my new to me 2001 Hobie Wave. My question is, would a stand-up length paddle be one to take just in case? Yeah, so a paddle from a stand-up paddle board be very good, especially if it's one of those adjustable ones. You could adjust it so it's minimum length, because the one problem with taking a stand-up paddleboard paddle on the boat with you is at their regular length, they are pretty long. So it'd just be like how and where you would store that bad boy. That would be the issue. But yes, good idea, especially if it is one of the adjustable length ones. Yeah, into it. Okay, Jose, we have coming from China, I believe. There are a lot of people using Hobie 16s to tow foils. Yeah, I think I was one of them, actually. That was a very fun afternoon doing the foiling towing with the 16. Problem was the 16 was a bit too quick for the foils that we were using. How many a Hobie 16 can tow? I think, wasn't there a video of the Hobie 16 towing 5 foils behind? Okay, Frank asked, just to be clear, are you suggesting aluminium rudder pins are best? I would say they're not. It's it's a 50-50 choice, because the stainless rudder pins, they don't wear. They'll last forever, and it'll be the other parts that will be getting worn, because the stainless is a harder metal than the other metal that it will be up against. But the stainless absolutely won't break as well. So if your boat does hit something going backwards with the rudders down, you're going to damage something bigger, more expensive, and more difficult to replace. So for those reasons, I would say the aluminium ones are definitely better. I don't know if aluminium rudder pins are available for the Prindle 16, 15, or any of the Prindles in that case, or what your mounting system is. But I would say on a smaller boat like the Prindle 15, where the load isn't ridiculous, I'd say if there is an option, I'd certainly get hold of some aluminium rudder pins and try them out, because then you've got that peace of mind that you have got a disposable part if your boat does hit the bottom going backwards. Okay, just scrolling back, scrolling forwards. Oscar, any tips for finding very small points where the hulls are leaking? Yeah, we had a look at this, I think. Yeah, my go-to method for leaky hull finder is what we do, two-person job, I would say, is what we'll do is we'll take a bung and we'll either modify the bung, or we'll get a pump, like a kite pump, some sort of foot pump, but where the end of the nozzle kind of fits the bung hole. And then one person to be pumping air into the hull, the other person can take some soapy water and just rub soapy water over the whole hull as it's being pumped, and look for where the bubbles are being blown. I know, sounds crazy, but it is a method that's been used here, and that method has worked. But the first things to check before going for that, check that your rubber seal is in good condition and you have got one, and check there's no sand or stuff in the bung housing. Make sure you do put your soapy water over all of the stuff mounted at the back of the boat especially, and just looking for those bubbles, and you should hopefully get and find the source of the leakage. All right, scrolling back. Oh yeah, Oscar says, because after sailing he always has some litres of water in the hulls. Okay, Frank says, have you ever tried wing foiling? No, I haven't tried that yet. Pretty keen to have a go though. Hi James, great to have you with us. Okay, Frank says, I have a bit of sway in my stainless pins, so how can I fix this bit of sway? Okay, for that bit of play, I'd have to direct you in the direction of the servicing your rudders video. I don't know if such a system is available for the Prindles, but with the Hobies, there's plastic bushes that we can get that go between the gudgeon and the rudder pin to take that bit of movement out. If that isn't available for the Prindle, you could try some Hobie bushes in there, or if you're really keen, you could see about getting some sort of bushing machined to fit. Ron says, happy hump day. Well, I didn't know it was happy hump day, but thanks for bringing that to our attention. All right, I'm going for the next preloaded question, if that's all right with everyone. All right, so Nick says, this is a good question. How do you stop these things from stalling? Okay, as we have probably all experienced, is it is very easy to stall a catamaran, especially like a Hobie 16 or a Hobie 14, very easy to stall. So the main way to avoid stalling, or as well as that, to get away from being stalled, to get the boat moving again, is it is all about the main sheet. The usual cause of stalling is by having too much main sheet in. So if you ever, firstly, let's go for the cure first before the prevention. If you ever find yourself stalled, the best way to get unstalled is to completely release the main sheet and the traveller, and because it's the mainsail that's pulling the boat into the wind. If you haven't got forward momentum, forward, you know, if you're not moving forwards, the rudders aren't working. So it's just the sail which is trying to turn the boat, a bit like a weather vane. So if it's just turning into the wind, it's because the sails are in too much. So if in doubt, let everything out as much as you can, the main sheet and the traveller. And then the jib, if you've got a jib, the jib will help to pull the front of the boat away from the wind. So let's draw a small picture to have a look at this. We don't need our rudder pin anymore. So is this in the right place? Yes, it is. So here's our boat, and let's sort of generalize and say that the pivot point on the boat is about here. That is the point where the boat pivots, because that is what a pivot point will do, of course. And then we've got the mainsail and the jib. Maybe you haven't got a jib. If you have got a jib, we've got the jib. The jib is in front of the pivot point. So if we pull the jib in, it's going to pull the front of the boat away from the wind. Okay, this is if we haven't got that forward momentum, but it's so important to know what the sails do. I think it's a good idea for everybody to go out and try a bit of rudderless. Check out the rudderless video. And the mainsail, because the mainsail is being pushed, its pressure behind the pivot point. So the pressure behind the pivot point is going to turn the boat into the wind, and that is why we stall. If we haven't got the rudders working, main sheet's in too tight, it's going to pull us into the wind. The mainsail is of course much bigger than the jib, so the mainsail is always going to override the jib. So even if we have got the jib in tight, a mainsail that is too tight is going to pull us into the wind, and that is why we're going to stall. So by letting the mainsail out completely, even if we haven't got a jib, mainsail and traveller all the way out, then that's going to give us the best chance of getting away from the wind. If the most difficult time to get away from the wind is if the wind is very light, and if that is the case, and the wind is very light, and like maybe you're on a Hobie 14, no jib, just the mainsail, absolutely stalled. The one way you can always get the boat to turn away from the wind is get the mainsail all the way out and move your body weight towards the back on the leeward side. Now, can we see what that does in this very clear diagram? Is that's going to put the pivot point now further back and on the leeward side. By doing that, it means that all of this pressure in the sail, because there'll always be some, is going to be further forward than the pivot point, which is going to turn the boat away from the wind. There we go. And that is how we stop the boat from stalling. When we're tacking, this comes into it. When we're head to wind, if we don't release the main sheet, that is when we're going to have a bad tack and possibly stall the boat. There we go. So that was for Nick. Hope that answers that for you, Nick. And right, just going back to the live questions. Okay, Jose says, I'm seeing more people using Rhino 7 to create new compatible parts and print them in 3D printing machines. What kind of parts would make sense to have a spare? Oh my goodness, that is massive. I believe you have a getaway, Jose, which means definitely rudder cams, rudder bushes. But in a boat, it depends how often you're using the boat and how often you feel that you need to have those parts replaced. But I'd say enough for one service of, it's the rudder system pretty much. Those are the parts on that sort of boat which need replacing the most often. If you're sailing a 16 or 14, the mast biscuits, the Teflon chips that sit in the bottom of the mast base, it'd be good if you could get some material and 3D print some inexpensive alternative for those bad boys. But other than that, of the non-metal fittings, I would just go around your boat looking at all of the non-metal fittings, looking at what could be 3D printed. Is it something that you ever need to replace? And there you go. All right. We've got John Bishop here from, of course, the great YouTube channel Middle-Aged Guy Learning How to Skate. Big Bobby 14 no jib stall up into nose wheelie, capsize every time. Yeah, so the Hobie 14 is notorious for the backwards capsize because the hulls have got such little volume. I'd like to say hello, John, by the way. Nice to have you with us as always. I don't know if you caught it, but we did talk about the Cumberland earlier in this episode, but nobody's asking about the Whiffle Strop. Yeah, so because of the low volume of the Hobie 14, it is very easy once the wind starts getting up a bit to capsize backwards. So if you are sailing a 14 in any amount of wind, like if there's enough to start tickling the windward hull up into the air, or especially if you're able to trapeze, then when you're tacking, don't move so far back. And if you stall, don't sit here because you're going to capsize. That is if the wind has got some strength to it. But this is if it's very light wind. Because if the wind is reasonably strong, just letting the mainsail out a lot should be enough to get you going again. But it's only if the wind is really light to get back here. Otherwise, as John says, you are going for a dip. Lovely. Everyone loves a dip. Okay. Oscar says, are the small... I've just got my light back. Are these small plastic screws in the back of the hull to prevent water coming in the same for all Hobies? Yes, they are. They are universal across the whole Hobie range. Not the one from the 16, I remember. No, they are all exactly the same. The Tiger, FX1, 15, 16, 14. I would dare say the Wave Getaway, Catsy, Twixie, Max, T1, T2, perhaps even the Bravo. Okay, we've got George on board. George is actually a representative from RS Sailing. Those are the guys responsible for the aero and the 400, 800, 200, 300, 100, 500, 600 and 700 amongst many others. And George says, what is your initial reaction to Daft Punk news? I've set up a shrine and cried for 7 hours. Yeah, if you didn't know, the I believe French electro pop disco crossover group have split up, but I'd say they've had a good run, and unlike other, we're talking music now, unlike other bands who keep flogging that horse, they're getting out while the going's good rather than milking it until the going gets bad. Let's finish with positive memories of random access memories rather than finishing going, that wasn't very good, was it? Let's stop now. That was my initial thoughts on the split there. Okay, E1K, my Hobie dealer sells his biscuits for less than €2. And in the real world, where you're sailing at weekends, maybe for a week during the holidays, or not quite as much as we do here, you probably only need to replace your biscuits twice a season. There we are. Life Farmer 07, hey Joe. Last time I went sailing, I was putting my mast down and the mast foot broke off. Oh dear. Do you have any idea that I can put it back on my mast? Oh yeah, if it's come off, then you will be able to put it back in. It's usually just some pop rivets that that fit the mast foot onto the mast. Put it on with a bit of Sikaflex around it as well to get a good seal, because what you don't want is a leaky mast. But yeah, if the bottom of the mast and the mast foot is still in good condition, then you should be fine just to whack it back in and off you go. Pardon. But perhaps you should have a look at why it broke when you were dropping the mast as well. Okay, Jose, quick question. Hobie 16 and getaway, mast forward and mast backwards. How to figure out according to wind conditions? Should we adjust, or are there specific tuning conditions to consider? Okay, so yeah, mast rake, Jose is talking about. The general rule with mast rake, if you are going to be moving it, is as the wind increases, move it further back. So we're moving the centre of effort back. Also, we're on a 16, because we're altering the mast rake using the jib halyard tension, we are going to be on the 16. As we release the jib halyard, we're allowing the mast to fall away to leeward, to leeward as well, which is going to help us to reduce power. We're going to be getting less tension in the leach of the sail, again giving us less power and a better exhaust for the wind. Like on a windsurfer where you see they have this loose leach on the fast windsurfers, we're doing the same with our 16 by letting the rig tension off, which at the same time is going to be raking the mast back more. But I would usually factory settings for most of the Hobies. I haven't actually got a getaway, but it's always been on all of the boats when they come out of the factory to have the pin on 4 if you are, let's say, of a medium weight or more, and 3 if you're lightweight or lighter. I would say are your go-to positions on those shroud adjusters if they are original factory fresh shrouds, and if you've got the full set here with the chain plates, what I like to call the twisty bits as well, then that is the spot. But if your boat is from, if it's an American boat, then that might be different, or if it's a getaway, that might be different as well. But that's all that I could say there. There we go. All right, this is a good question. Jose says, what is the music you think will give you the beans before you sail to get that vibe fast? I don't know, depends on the day. But if I'm feeling a bit loose, maybe a bit of Kool and the Gang, just to get it going, you know, or Tower of Power. Now that is some good music to get you going. From from playing the video game Wipeout with my little boy, I do find that, like hard trance really gets the blood pumping. Or if it's going to be rock, maybe some Alter Bridge. Now that's a good band. Check them out if you haven't. If you like rock music, Alter Bridge, very good. Okay, James says, Jeff says you should see the bushings that Robin made for her rudder systems. I would like to see that. James says, what is the average life of rigging? I would say maybe 4 years. I wouldn't like to say more than 4 years, but to replace your rigging every 4 years, I'd say that's very safe. And then you would still have your original rigging to use. That is unless you are storing your boat indoors a lot of the time. The thing with the rigging is it is degrading if it is sitting outside. Possibly if you're sailing on a lake, that 4 years be more like 5 or 6 years, because you're not getting the salt water kind of in the air in an onshore wind, which is going to be constantly hitting the wires, degrading them. But I'd say between 4 years from new, 4 years if you're by the sea and your boat is rigged all the time, 6 years perhaps if you're sailing on a lake. Okay, Jose says, just to share, I found it so difficult to find the rigging that I turned to climbing material because the grip you get and the cost is much cheaper. Interesting, worth a look. Oscar says, the screws in the back of my hulls, they're also the same for my Miracle 20. Yes, I'm pretty sure, especially in Europe anyway, the bungs or the screws are the same for everything. Okay, if we could have no further questions now. We've been going for 45 minutes and I've still got a few preloaders just to respond to, if that's all right. These are good ones though, so I hope you're ready. The next one is from Willis, who says, could you explain why you would change the main sheet, hangers and block configuration on a Hobie 16? So the reason, as we've said before, the reason we'd change the main sheet hangers on the boom is if we're going from the main sheet coming from 2 points. So your normal Hobie 16 boom, can we see this? Yes, we can. If it's, I don't know what age they changed, but let's say if it's pre-1985 maybe, you would as standard have 2 hangers on the boom where you'd have perhaps a double block here and a single block here, and then you'd have a block down here, and then your main sheet would look something like this. But on the more modern boats, we have, I'll draw the more modern in black, we would have a triple block here. So we'd want to have that hanger halfway in between where the 2 old ones were, and then the main sheet would run thus. Now, the question, why is having this better than these 2? It's because less is more. There's fewer things to get tangled up. When you're preparing the boat, there's the amount of, I would think, if you're taking your main sheet off the boat and you've got this 3-point configuration, there's a massive scope for getting in a tangled mess. Whereas with the standard modern system, a lot less scope for getting in a tangled mess. Also, I don't know what the physics says, but perhaps having it just coming from 1 point gives you a more even pull and a more efficient pull as well. So those are the reasons that I would say this is better, as well as it's taking up less space. So this one's going to come forwards a little bit, which means when you're moving across the boat, you're not going to be able to actually physically be as far back on the boat when you're going across as if you had it moved back slightly. And the more you think about it, the more reasons you could look at. Wind resistance as well, having two separate things, it's going to create more drag than one thing, and so on and so forth. But that is what I would say. All right, next pre-loaded question from Pablo. Pablo has got a Hobie 14, and when sailing, he says the rudder is very hard. I think it means the steering is very hard. Is this possibly because of wear, or is it because both rudders are not perfectly aligned? I'd say no and no. The reason is going to be, we're going back to rudder tuning again. The reason is going to be because the rudders are not locking down properly. Okay, I've got a Hobie 16 here, same system. If you're holding a camera with one hand and you want to put your rudder down, one hand here, 1 foot on the back of the rudder blade, and there we go. That is a tip. Wow. EPO 3s. That's a good looking rudder blade. Yeah, so the reason that your steering would be heavy 9 times out of 10 is if when you put your rudder down, it isn't locking in tight here. So if when you pull your rudder backwards like that, if there's any space appearing here, the further back the rudder blade goes, the heavier your steering will get. That is just the nuts and bolts of it. So what you have to do to make that better is the nuts and bolts of it by adjusting this bad boy on the top. But check out the rudder maintenance video. There is far too much to talk about to do a complete rudder job just now. I will put that one as well in the video description. What I did notice earlier with this one is she is ready for a rebush. We can see, can we see the amount of movement there? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so there we go. That is why the steering gets heavy generally. Alignment, of course, can be an issue, but alignment doesn't generally go out. If it's right, unless you adjust it trying to make it better and get it horribly wrong, it's not going to get worse, because it can't. So it's got to be that. Okay, it's a completely different question now from Alfonso. Alfonso says, I currently live in Indiana, and next year I'm looking to move to the west coast of the USA. They'll be waving the flags when you arrive. That's 3,600 kilometers away. Do you think I can haul a Hobie 16 across the country on a trailer? First answer, yes, for sure. It's a long way, but you might need to take a few breaks. But yes, and yes, you can. Next part of the question, the trailer that I'm looking at buying is in great shape and looks new. Fantastic. Great news. I wonder if you could make any suggestions for the haul. Should I service the trailer every so many kilometers, for example, to make sure the wheels are in good shape? I'd say if it looks like it's brand new before you go, then you're off to a flying start. But do take the trailer to somewhere that does tires and wheels, and get them to check the tires, check the bearings. The bearings are the things that are going to let you down, if anything. If the trailer's been into salt water and it hasn't been washed properly, or if the wheels haven't been turned for a long time, the bearings can let you down quite badly. So take it somewhere to get checked, and then a professional bearing, tire and wheel place will be able to let you know exactly what your trailer is capable of and give you that peace of mind that you need. They can also give you advice on tyre pressure as well. It's not always optimal, is not always what's written on the tyre, depending on how much load you have on the trailer. Also, take some time to make sure your boat is tied on nicely and there's absolutely nothing that can rub, because anything that's rubbing a little bit over that amount of distance, if it's rubbing a little bit, you could have a big bit of wear on some fiberglass, on the mast, on something by the time you arrive. So there you go. Anything you're putting in a box, make sure it's well padded, because it's going to jump around a lot. But I would say absolutely take on that journey. It is there to be done. I've never actually personally done a journey that long ever, because you can't actually go that far in Europe. The furthest I ever drove with a trailer was from the Hobie factory in Toulon in the south of France up to Copenhagen in Denmark. And that was, I think it was something like 2,000 kilometers. And it seemed like a very, very long way as just going up for the Tiger Europeans back in the day. All right. Everyone's saying check the bearings. It's a very good idea. Chris says for rigging, use heat set Dyneema. Ernesto, hi to Ecuador. Nice to have you on board. Ecuador. JP later. Hi, Joe. It's flying the hull, making your top speed higher. Flying the hull so that the hull is just clear of the water. That is the spot that you're looking for. We're into quick answers now, as well as no more questions, please. There's a lot of bearings. Chris says also lighting, good idea. I've had it so many times when like 10 minutes before I'm due to leave, we think, all right, should we check the lights? This is the biggest mistake, because lights that don't work, it's not a quick job to fix them. And yeah, there we go. Oh, hi, Holly. Great to have you on board. It's Holly in Oman. Hopefully we're going to be joining us on the team this summer. Would it be possible to print the drain screw on a 3D printer? Well, that's beyond my knowledge of the 3D printer. Okay, just got a few questions left, then I'm going to have to log off. Oh, this is a very good question from Jose. First, these are called, the brand is Dirty Dog. I've been using Dirty Dog sunglasses probably for about 20 years now, and I live and work in sunglasses conditions, so it's been a very good test for the Dirty Dogs, and I would recommend them to anyone. They are excellent sunglasses at a very good price point, something about 50 euros for a pair. This model is called Axel, and I do like them. They're comfortable, and you look cool. They're extremely durable. They can take the knocks, and they're not too expensive, so you don't have to be too precious about them. Not like a set of Ray-Bans. All right, next preloaded question from Steve, and I'm going to do one of these short videos about this as well. It says, just to summarize what he said, dagger boards. All right, the nuts and bolts of what to do with the dagger boards is, for upwind sailing, have them all the way down. For reaching, have them halfway up. And for broad reaching, sailing downwind, what we're going to do is, ideally, we want to have them so the bottom of the dagger board is down to the same depth as the bottom of the rudder, or perhaps a little bit higher.